Hello, students. I hope that you're having a great day. I am excited because today we are going to start our social studies unit for this summer. What I would like to teach you guys is about the American Revolution. Now, if you were my student this last year, we didn't learn about the American Revolution. It's no longer a fourth grade topic. Um, and if I could, I would be teaching Kuwait history, but I don't have any of the books with me. So I thought that instead we would learn about the American Revolution. It used to be in the fourth grade curriculum, so I know a lot about it, and I've studied it a lot. I know a lot of my students that have had me in person for classes know that I am really into science because I'm going to be a science teacher in the future. However, I started out as a high school social studies teacher teaching American history. So I know a lot about this topic. It is something that is very exciting to me, and I'm very excited for you to be able to learn some more. So I hope that you have fun with this. You will use this in middle and high school, so it's very important to learn. So you're not wasting your time by going through these social studies lessons if you're choosing to follow me teach these classes. We're going to be teaching the American Revolution, but we need some background information before we get into it. So we're going to be talking about the 13 British colonies that started before the American Revolution. Now, what is very important to understand is that in North America, where the United States exists now and where the 13 colonies existed, there were people there before that. The Native Americans lived along the east coast of North America and throughout all of the Americas before Europeans arrived. And it's very important to understand that the arrival of Europeans was not a good thing for Native Americans. It wasn't something that helped them. It actually really hurt them and destroyed their culture. When Europeans arrived in North America, most Native American tribes had been decimated by disease. All of the diseases that Europeans had been exposed to over time and built up immunities to, such as smallpox, measles, Native Americans had never experienced before. They were on a different continent and they didn't have any resistance to this. So when Europeans started arriving first in Central America, when the Spanish arrived in the Caribbean and then in Mexico, diseases started spreading throughout North and South America. So the North American Native Americans, they experienced disease before they ever even saw a European because it spread so fast. And so a lot of their population was decimated. They had lost at least 50% of the people in the last 100 years. So they were not as strong as they used to be, which made it really easy for the Europeans to take over their land. As well as the Europeans had some technological advances. So it was easier for them because they had guns, they had horses. Horses were not native to the Americas. They were brought over by Europeans. Eventually, Native Americans would get horses, but it wasn't something that, it wasn't an animal that originally lived in North America. So all of these technological advances combined with disease made it very, very easy for the Europeans to establish themselves and to take over land that originally belonged to the Native Americans. So I just want you to understand that when we start talking about these new colonies, while it was good for England, it was very, very bad for the people that already lived there. And it's really important for us to remember that. So one of the first colonies that was attempted by the English, the 13 colonies were colonies of England. So we're going to talk about kind of how English started trying to colonize this area, was the colony of Roanoke. Now, this did not end up being a successful colony. It ended up failing. The first English attempt sent a little over 100 people to Roanoke, and it failed. By the end of the colony, almost all of the colonists had died, and there was barely anybody left when they came back to see them. There was a second attempt led by John White. Um, During this time, he brought 100 more settlers to Roanoke. One of the first Americans was born on North America, who was named Virginia Dare, which is an important event. But they had a lot of problems with local tribes. The local Native Americans did not want them there, probably for some of the reasons we talked about earlier on the last slide. Well, John White went back to Europe to try, or back to England, to try to get more support for his colony. When he came back a year later, the entire colony had disappeared. The only thing that they had left of the colony was this word written in wood, Croatoan or Croatian or something along those lines. Now, this has caused a lot of conspiracy theories. Some people think that maybe they all starved to death. Some other people think maybe they were killed by Native Americans. Other people think maybe they joined the Native American tribes or moved somewhere else, but we really don't know. I've included a link in the description if you want to read more about Roanoke. It's really interesting to see all the different theories about what happened to this colony. You can see it in the description below if you're interested. Now, the first successful colony was at Jamestown, Virginia. However, it was not easy for them to succeed. The first year, many, many people died after they had settled this colony in Jamestown, Virginia. The colony was named after the king, but again, it was very difficult for them. And at first, the Powhatan, I probably mispronounced that, and I apologize to anybody for mispronouncing the name of that tribe, but they were hostile to the settlers at first. But eventually, they helped out the Jamestown settlers. A man named John Smith had been captured by the Powhatan tribe, but with the help of one of the chief's daughters, who you might have heard of before, named Pocahontas, he was able to escape and gain favor with the tribe, and they helped them to survive. John Smith eventually began leading the colony, and he set up a system where if you didn't work, you didn't eat. He wanted everybody to work, which made him not as popular with some of the settlers because a lot of them had been used to not having to work as hard. They were upper class. But he said everyone needed to work. Otherwise, they didn't get to eat. One thing that made Jamestown successful was eventually the discovery of tobacco. Tobacco became a cash crop that they could sell back to Europe. Tobacco is used to create cigarettes and other things that people smoke, and that ended up helping Jamestown survive and make it financially feasible. They needed this crop to make it worth people investing in this colony and sending money and sending more settlers. So that's why tobacco is important. However, it is not going to be a good development for the slave trade, which we're going to learn about later. To create tobacco, it requires a lot of slaves. And so this started having slaves being sent to Jamestown to farm tobacco from Africa. And so while it did help Jamestown survive, it wasn't good for the development of slavery. The 13 colonies eventually developed. I'm going through this really fast because there's a lot we could talk about, but I'm just trying to give you a very general background. Again, I have some links down below to learn more, but the important thing to know is that there were 3 different culture groups. There was the North, the Middle colonies, and the South. And they each had different desires, different reasons why they came to North America and why they settled there, and different economies. There's a very good video from Vocabulary that I have included in the description Please watch it. It's a lot of fun, and I think it'll give you a good idea of the different cultures of the 13 colonies, as well as I've included another Ducksters link to learn more about them. What is important for us to know as we go forward with the American Revolution is that colonial government was something that a lot of these people experienced. How the government was set up was that each colony had a charter from the King of England. The England was a monarchy, and the king controlled most of the government. They did have a parliament. It was a constitutional monarchy, so he didn't have absolute power. But for the colonies, the king would give a charter to somebody to say they could establish a colony here. And he had the power, the king had the power to appoint governors to these different colonies. That would make it seem like the king would have a lot of control if he could control who was the governor of the colony. But in reality, there was a colonial legislator that was elected by land-owning men that lived in the colonies. That had a lot more power than the governor because the colonial legislator controlled how much the governor got paid. So they could decide that if the governor wasn't doing something they liked, they could decide that he got paid less, which is a lot of power over somebody. So these colonial governments were used to basically self-governing themselves, being able to elect representatives and have them decide the laws of that colony. Again, they had a governor appointed by the king, but he didn't have a lot of power because the colonial legislator controlled how much the governor got paid. Before we get into the revolution, we're also going to have to talk about France. There's a very important event that leads to the American Revolution that we're going to learn about next time called the French and Indian War. But before that, we just need to look really quick at the screen at this picture on the right to show you that the red area is where Britain or England controlled area in North America. The blue was area that France controlled, and this yellow is Spanish-controlled territory. France and Britain did not like each other at this time, and they are going to go to war in England or in Europe, which is going to cause a war in North America, a very, very expensive war. So we're going to talk more about that next time. I hope this was good, a good overview of information you'll need for the American Revolution. Again, if you are more interested in these topics, take a look at the links I've included below to get a little bit more information. We will start our next lesson on the French and Indian War next week. See you guys.